Okay, hello from Diavazo Greek Books, the Greek bookshop. We are here in a live conversation with our guest of honor today, Harvey, an independent author of the Ionian Trilogy uh, and the books Finding Ithaca, which is the first book, and Telegonos, the second book that has just come out now. We've been facing a few technical difficulties to get this conversation started, but I think this time we might actually just about get it, as we've troubleshoot a few bits and we're back again. This is the third take, so just for full transparency out there. So hopefully we will manage to have Anna with us right now and ask all the questions that we've got for her, but also just hear what she's got to say about her own journey as a small independent author, starting her writing journey rather recently as well. So hopefully she will be able to join us this time, as this is an event postponed from last week. So apologies for that, for anyone who was able to make that and not this one, but hopefully you will be able to find this video on YouTube as soon as obviously Anna joins us and we're able to hold the mini interview. I've sent her an invitation and we should be starting soon. But again, if not, we'll probably going to have to just reschedule or organize this somewhat differently. So yeah, Anna is trying to join us. Hopefully this time she will be able to actually join us, and we will have her here and ask all the questions, have your comments hopefully and your questions to her, especially if you are also interested in books about Greek mythology and retellings of Greek mythology, then this is definitely for you, as both the books are based on the story of Odysseus and the Odyssey. So even if you're not familiar at all with the Odyssey, the theme or the concept or the story, this is definitely going to be an interesting conversation and a good introduction to maybe start exploring the themes of the Odyssey, as it is quite an inspiring story that has definitely inspired a lot of authors, including Anna, who we're waiting very eagerly to join our call. And I think we can actually have Anna join. Let's see. It is trying. Okay, it is trying, but I mean, this is the furthest we've ever got, which is great. I mean, I'm really happy about this. So hopefully it will want to actually connect at this time. Hello, Anna. Oh my God. Hi. Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay.
Perfect. I can hear you perfect. Lovely. Love the headphones as well. My God, we managed it. Yes. Lovely. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I'm struggling a little bit. Let me. Sorry, just 2 secs. Just see what I can do. Just right. I'm going to try and go back. No, I don't want to cancel this, but it's very. I
Oh,
can't
yes.
see you.
Please don't cancel. Yes.
I can't see you. I can just about hear you.
But okay, you cannot see me, but you can hear me,
I can
right?
hear you. Yeah, right.
Right.
Let
You
me
can
just.
hear me. I think that's the important
And
bit.
also, headphones aren't working, so that doesn't help either.
They looked great. I mean, they actually looked, very, very good and very fancy. So, like, you could have kept them all just for the style. That's
Okay,
absolutely
let
fine.
me see if I can hear you a little bit better now.
Yeah, absolutely. Do what you have to do. But I'm very glad I've got you on screen. I'm very glad.
Okay, I might be able to get you on screen as well. So let me just see if
Cool.
I can pick you up on the screen.
Let's see. But as I
So
said,
let's just
don't worry about that.
see.
As long as you can hear me,
Yeah,
because I can see you and I've got you on screen, so it's absolutely fine.
brilliant. Okay, let's just have a look and see if I can just get you up. Yeah, okay. I think I've got us.
All right, lovely. Okay.
All
Yes.
right.
Yeah. If you want to
Yeah.
like sit back as well so that I can see you properly as well. Lovely.
Okay.
Excellent. Perfect. Lovely. Oh my God, I'm so excited. We made it. We made it.
With the
Okay. This is
technology, yeah, it's been
well
really,
done.
it's
Well
just been
done.
really, really tricky.
No, I mean, I think I've definitely explained this to people, but I'm very, very glad we actually made it now and we're here now. So
Yeah.
welcome. Very, very glad to have you. And as I was just telling people, I do have a few questions for you because I gave a bit of intro. I mentioned your books, obviously, with Telegonos being like the most recently published as well, the
Yeah.
Ionian Trilogy, how it is themed around the Odyssey. But I've got questions, and I definitely want to hear it from you about everything that relates to the book, and of course your writing journey, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're ready, let's get
Yeah.
started.
I'm ready.
I've been
Um,
ready.
yeah,
But
it's Mihara Naime. It's great to be here as
same
well.
here. Excellent. No, love that. Love that. And of course, I know that you are, an avid learner of Greek as well. But I also want to say at this point, for whoever is like watching us live, please, by all means, feel free to post your comments, your questions in the comments section, or just, say hi, tell us where you're watching from, just, send us your regards. Yeah, Anna, like without further ado, yeah, I think my first question, obviously, as soon as you got in touch and we talked about Telegonos, I literally wanted to ask you so much, like, now that Telegonos is out and it is a sequel to Finding Ithaca, part of the Ionian Trilogy, right? How would you compare your journey, from publishing the first book to publishing the second book, and what impact do you feel this has had on you, on your writing, on the writing and the publishing, basically? How would you describe this?
Yeah, that's a really lovely question to try and reflect on it, actually. Because what I would say is writing and publishing is just a whole new, different experience. It's a kind of real privilege that you're sharing your voice with a wider audience, and that's quite daunting. Um, I think publishing that debut novel, Finding Ithaca, which is about 5 years ago now,
Mm.
it's a very different, contrasting experience. So, the story behind Finding Ithaca was incubating quite a long time, sort of many, many years really in the making. And as you probably will be aware, that the story, the myth of Odysseus, is such a well-known story.
Yes.
There's lots of ancient sources, the Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. but it's also, particularly since it's been published, become much more popular. So there's Pat Barker and Natalie Haynes, and movies being made.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more of that story there to get hold of. And alongside that, there's a modern parallel story overlapping with the ancient story, which is a bit of a historical mystery detective story about the search for the palace of Odysseus. So, in terms of like that story, um, it was quite a long time incubating, and also the locations I knew very well. So it really helped to be really immersed in the environments and that sense of place.
Yes.
That said, the whole publishing journey was just completely new. So it was like a voyage into the unknown. It was a bit like Odysseus on his
I was about
travels.
to say your own kind of odyssey, isn't it? Yes.
You just didn't know quite where it was going to end up. And it also, it didn't help that it came out in the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. Would the reader enjoy it? Would they find it interesting as much as I hoped? And there's always that sense of you have an idea, and how does that translate into the lived experience and reality? So for four, for 2 years, it went out into the ether during COVID, and it was hard to get out and meet people. So it was a bit of a vacuum. And then over time, obviously it gained traction. More people heard of it, and more people got interested in it and read it and got feedback. I should also say that getting to grips with social media was also part of that journey, as you probably
Love it.
gathered.
Love it.
But,
No, no, exactly. No,
but yeah,
that's exactly it. You all of a sudden you had to do things that you wouldn't have done before, and I know you've kind of touched on it as well in our personal conversations as well. But it
yeah,
definitely kind of like launched you in the world of socials, because it's almost
yeah,
impossible as a small independent author, right, to not have socials and still try to connect for your book, basically to promote your book.
exactly.
I
Yeah,
mean, this being, one, a case in point, basically.
yeah,
But no, so yeah, like, I mean, as you say, like, it definitely sounds like it was your own odyssey, like taking time as
yes,
well, a long time, kind of, in the waiting for me in many aspects, not just, as you said, in terms of the story, getting the story together, getting all those, sources together, but also, after the publishing kind of like happened,
yeah,
that in itself was its own kind of odyssey, its own nostos, right? And
yeah.
you mentioned the locations very well, right? So, like, I mean, naturally I have to ask, what is your connection with Greece and the Odyssey as well? More specifically, obviously you mentioned that you had like just your own personal Odyssey going on,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Well, my connection with Greece and the Odyssey has been a significant thread that's just run through my whole life. And it's really hard to explain, as it would make more sense if I came from a Greek family background, which I don't. I don't have any relatives who are Greek. So, but from being a child onwards, I've always been fascinated with Greek mythology and archaeology, and sort of remember the Odyssey being read to me as a bedtime story when I was very young. But on my parents' bookcase, they also had a book that was about Schielmann's discovery of Troy. So people might know he went armed with a copy of the Iliad and discovered the archaeological site of Troy from the descriptions. So I was always really interested, and then that interest probably got amplified by family holidays. We went to Cyprus,
Yes.
and prior to the Turkish invasion, and saw some of the incredible archaeology there on the island, and then also the island of Rhodes and the ancient sites there. So, so it's always been this fascination. And then when I was at secondary school, we did Latin in those days, and I saw ancient Greek lettering on the classroom board from a previous lesson and thought, I really want to study that. And I really want to know modern Greek. So from about the age of 16, I really wanted to learn modern Greek. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, that sounds amazing, because obviously, you know, like other people like see the alphabet and they see like an impossible challenge, right? But you saw a challenge that was actually calling you, and that is quite beautiful, I think. But yeah, also as you say, like, you know, the importance of having this kind of like curiosity about it quite early on. You know, your bedtime stories you mentioned, and like being read to as well, you know, which is, you know, super important. It's exactly how we start like shaping a lot of our, you know, well, later on adult quests, essentially, right, and criteria. No, that's I mean, that's absolutely lovely, I think. So like, so what do you think, like, I mean, this is like, you know, this might be a bit odd, but like, what do you think the Palace of Odysseus is located?
So I think that it's on Kefalonia. I think that it's on the Peliki Peninsula, so that's the west bit of Kefalonia.
Right.
And that's because it fits the descriptions of the Homeric poems. So in the Iliad and the Odyssey, you get descriptions of places. And as I said, the physical description was really important in locating the ancient site of Troy. But also there's epithets that go with places. And for example, one is Sandy Pylos, as you say in modern Greek. And you kind of initially thought, why do you call it Sandy Pylos? Why would it be called that? Because the palace or the excavation of Pylos is about 2 kilometers up a mountain and is nowhere near the sea, and is in the middle of the countryside. And then we were on holiday, and we happened to kind of come down the hill, and we came across at the bottom, there's the Gialova Lagoon, if I pronounced that right. Which is
people from Kefalonia? Yeah, do tell us in the comments, like at some point.
Yeah, and it's very distinctive sandy lagoon, which you don't see very commonly. So to my mind, there's a genuine geographical knowledge of whoever composed the Homeric poems. They knew some of the geography. So Ithaca is described as low-lying and furthest out to the west, which, as you know, does not describe modern Ithaca, which is more to the east and is not low-lying, is quite mountainous and craggy with very limited agricultural land.
Although, like, are we sure that, you know, Homer, you know, was kind of like aware of like geography? Because I mean, I you know, you say he kind of like was, but like, I mean, do we have evidence that he was, like, you say it's because like obviously he did write whatever like he wrote like years later, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so like, you know, it is, you know, like the fact that he called it Ithaca, but maybe he was talking about Kefalonia is very likely as well. But at the same time, yeah, like that's why it's like really interesting to see like what you think about, obviously, because you know you looked into it, you researched it, right?
Yeah,
and you've been there with the texts in mind, basically.
Yeah. Well, I think the missing piece came when we were on holiday. It's about 15 years ago, maybe, on Kefalonia. And there was somebody at that point, we got into a chance conversation and they were promoting this theory, Bicklestone's theory,
Right.
about the west side of Kefalonia, this
Mm-hmm.
Peliki Peninsula, originally being Ithaca, and that there being a huge
Okay.
landslide
Yeah.
in antiquity at some point, not quite sure when,
Mm-hmm.
but at that point it became joined to the main body of Kefalonia.
Yeah.
So they were promoting that, and they'd been doing tests on the land, on that stretch of the land,
Yeah.
and finding some evidence that at some point there was a seabed there that suggests, yeah,
Right.
it was an island.
Fair
But what
enough.
you've also got in the north is a description of where Odysseus, he returns to Ithaca after 20 years or so,
Yeah.
and he comes back and he's set down in a bay and he doesn't recognize where he is.
Mm. Mm.
And this bay is described as having two headlands and very shallow water where a, a ship can be landed and it doesn't need to be anchored.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there that he hides stuff in a cave. Well, there is a bay in the north part of this Peliki on
Right.
Kefalonia that just
Right.
absolutely nails this description, fits
Right.
the
Absolutely.
description. You know,
In-
so it's
Yeah.
very shallow. There's even a cave. You can,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I'm sure the land has changed a lot, but that basic shallow bay, it fits very well.
Yeah. But
The other thing I would say, I mean, narrowing it down, the well-known Greek archaeologist Spiros Marinatos, he
mm,
came from Kefalonia. I don't know
oh,
if you knew that.
I did. Well, the thing is that the surname is definitely telling that he comes from Kefalonia, but I didn't actually know that. So there you go.
Okay, and
Yes.
he came from a village called Kondoyanava, which
Right.
I think means close shaved. Is that right, or
Yeah. It was
short
a short
beard
beard. Yeah.
in Greek?
Yeah.
Um, and he thought it was in his hometown of Kondoyanava,
All
and
right.
did excavations around there, and they have found evidence of Mycenaean tombs,
Okay.
and they're
Yeah.
currently excavating in that area. And
Mm-hmm.
I think if I was to put my money on it, I suspect that area too,
All right.
because it's very close to agricultural land. It's very fertile, that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which, if you're a Mycenaean and you want fertile land,
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
predominantly an agricultural society. You're
Yeah.
dependent on vines and olive oil.
Yeah.
And also it's away from the coast, because in that
Yeah.
time there would have been a lot of piracy, so
Yeah. Yeah.
quite dangerous for
Exactly.
your home, your palace, to be by the coast where you're at risk of being attacked
Yeah. Yeah.
and looted. And then there's some circumstantial stuff like uh, again, Eumaeus, when Odysseus lands back on Ithaca,
Mm-hmm.
he's given shelter by a swineherd, Eumaeus, and it said Eumaeus, he goes to the palace and back within the same day, which suggests it's about 3 hours walk, 3 hours back.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes you to around that area of Condinava.
Okay. Yeah.
It's about that location.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that there's quite a few things that suggest it's maybe
Yeah.
in that area.
Yes, no, 100%. And yeah, I had no idea as well that Marinatos was also like looking for that as well. He actually did excavations with that in mind. But I think what you also
Yeah,
suggested there with you talking about the island and going like through the places to match the descriptions, I think that's actually great, challenge and a bit of activity basically for people, where they can just like, get the Odyssey if they've read it and if they've liked it, just get the
yeah,
Odyssey, go to Kefalonia, see what matches up with the descriptions, basically. Love that.
yeah,
I love that you did that as well. Was that
yes.
part of the research for the book, or did you just do it as in your own time, basically, and then you, like, things kind of like, it's like the pieces started falling together, basically?
But again, it was a bit of an accident
Mm,
that I went to Catalonia because in the first place it was in my 20s,
mm.
and just by coincidence I was in archaeology. I was studying in Athens,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
and just by chance I got offered a job on the island for a summer.
Right.
And so it gave me a chance to get
Absolutely,
to
yeah.
know the island and meet people and make friends. And so part of that idea that maybe this was where the Odysseus myth
Yeah.
really came from
Yeah.
started to form.
No,
Um,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and then I've been going back on and off for many, many years, um, keeping in touch with people. And so I
Precisely.
got to know the island pretty well. So
Yes.
it's given me an opportunity to really, know the
Yes.
places and get a sense of Catalonia.
Yes, no, exactly. As you said, like, it kind of like all started a bit accidentally, but then obviously it started becoming, a chosen course, basically. And I think it reflects as well what you said earlier about the incubating of the story has been like
Yeah,
taken years and years and years. Love it. No, that's amazing. Yeah, I think it's and I think what you said earlier about like not having any kind of like ties to the place, you've created them from the sounds of it, right? So it's almost like your chosen kind of like family and origins are there. So do you have any like favorite or less favorite characters from your books, either book,
yeah, that's a great question.
I know it's
But
not it can be a bit of a challenge, really, but like I had to ask it.
yeah, well, I think the main protagonist in the story, which is Odysseus and Kirke, or as it's written in her name is written in more Latin, is Circe.
So
We would know her as from
yeah, yeah.
the kind of Latin version of her name.
Hmm.
So Odysseus has always been a bit of a hero for me. He's a character. He's living in brutal times, and he's also a reluctant participant in the Trojan Wars. So he doesn't, when he's called to go to war in Troy, he doesn't just turn up. He feigns madness to avoid it. And then he turns up with a very small contingency of men, almost sticking his tongue out at Agamemnon, the Greek leader. Um, and then he emerges as like the real hero of the Trojan War. So again, if you go back to the original sources, he comes through as more the leader of the Greeks rather than Agamemnon, who is the ostensible
Yeah,
leader.
yeah.
Um, and he comes across as, pretty appalled by his level of leadership of Agamemnon, so where he does make some big mistakes, and you can see Odysseus getting quite angry and frustrated by this. But the other thing about Odysseus, which I really like, is he's very modern in many ways.
Mm.
So you think of this character, mythological character maybe, who lived 3,000 years ago, but
Mm.
you recognize some of his characteristics as being very modern.
Hmm.
So he's intelligent, he's open, he's curious. He's also continually applying his intelligence to the circumstances that he finds himself in.
Mm.
And that was part of the motivation of writing
Mm.
the Finding Ithaca, was, to bring him and that story to a new generation, like why he's so significant.
Mm.
And he's also the first hero that's not just using physical strength,
Mm.
to win, um, or position and rank, but he's using his intelligence. So he
Hmm.
comes across as being a very human character.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
with all his flaws, obviously, but like yeah, but I mean, so yeah, you would definitely say that yeah, you wrote your Odysseus as well, like from a a big kind of like Odysseus fan, basically. Yes, you were like,
Yeah, sure, sure.
when you were reading the Odyssey as well as expecting the Iliad, you were kind of like, you were really rooting for Odysseus, right? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the other character is Kirky,
Yes.
you know, who is known. I think we probably know her more as the sorceress Circe,
Yes.
and she's kind of like an outsider, but also a very spirited, independent woman, which is almost unknown in that
Yeah.
ancient world.
Yeah.
You know, a woman in her own right,
Yeah.
and also, you know, she turns the Greek warriors into pigs,
Mm-hmm.
and you can almost imagine the ancient Greek warriors balking with indignation, you know, at this affront that a woman should do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, hearing this story and almost spluttering on their wine, you
Yeah.
know, at
Yeah.
this part of the story.
But yeah, I guess it was the only way what this was acceptable was because she was made into a sorceress, right? Like a
Yeah,
witch, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, otherwise,
yeah,
she could never have that kind of status or like ability to, execute such a front like
yeah, sure.
to the men.
But she also, what I also like about her is she brings very female characteristics to the story. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ancient stories are very dominated, can be quite dominated by male.
Mm-hmm.
But what she's
Mm-hmm.
bringing is she's compassionate, she's caring, she's a perfect hostess. She rescues Odysseus when he's like at one of his lowest points. And it's her knowledge of the local area that again steers Odysseus back on course. So I think in Kirky, Odysseus like meets his female mirror and his perfect match, and
Mm-hmm.
so much so that he forms a really deep attachment to her.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has to be reminded of his duty by his men that they've got to return to Ithaca. Um, you know,
Right.
so this is like very, for that kind of ancient Greek patriarchal
Yeah.
society,
And
very subversive indeed, very challenging to
yeah.
have this kind of female figure. So I think that they're kind of really perfect match for them. So what I wanted to do
Mm.
again in the stories was like restore her place in the
Yes.
mythology, because this was such a big story in the ancient world
Yeah.
for sort of centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years. This story um, was so significant, and this relationship between Odysseus and
Mm.
Kirky was so significant and fascinated the ancient world
Yes.
for hundreds of years, you know, and yet we'd kind of forgotten it a bit.
Yeah,
So,
no, I mean, and definitely, I mean, I think Kirki Cersei has definitely been a quite an inspiring figure. I mean, you probably are familiar with, Madeline Miller's as well,
yeah,
book as well, that is also kind of, reclaiming that kind of like trope. And I think there's definitely enough space for more of these retellings of all these very, very significant, like, female figures that kind of showed up, in the stories, but not long enough, and not long
yeah,
enough for them to kind of like stay. I mean, I know for sure, for a fact, that we were not, when I was in school, for example, we were taught the Odyssey. We were not taught that bit about Cersei. We just, it was just, Cersei, the sorceress, move on, moving on.
yeah,
So, yeah, no,
like an
I
incidental
understand.
figure in the
Yeah.
story.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lady and there's another lady and that's it, and there's
yeah,
Penelope and that's it, But no, I mean, I think it's what you said earlier as well about like, kind of like amplifying your voice being amplified through writing. And I think, that is definitely, a noble cause to try and kind of, restore the narrative or
yeah,
just change the angle and have people think about certain heroes in a different way, have them live another life, basically, as it were.
Yeah, sure.
And no, that's lovely. No, yeah, I would say that yeah, definitely more retellings of all the female characters. Absolutely, yes, bring them on. But what would you say was the most challenging part to write? You know, and or in general, you know, if it's not necessarily for these books,
Yeah.
by writing these books, you know, what do you think is the most challenging part in the creative process of like writing for you?
Okay, okay. I'll try and answer that.
Yeah, like in the best,
So
you know, of your ability, because again, you know, I know it
yeah,
is a
okay.
personal process, right? Like, you know,
Yeah,
writing. So
sure. I mean, I think one of the things that for me was very challenging was writing a parallel contemporary story.
mm,
Uh, but what I wanted to do was make links why this ancient story was so relevant today and
yeah.
bring that fresh perspective. But it certainly set it up as being something more challenging for myself because, in essence, you're almost right. I was writing two stories in one
Mm.
book,
Yeah.
you know, and there's lots of moving parts within my book, you know, like the ancient story and the modern story play off one another.
Yeah.
So it's like a jigsaw moving around the pieces and getting the storylines to come together and fit
Mm.
well, perhaps was the biggest single challenge for that writing. You know, in Finding Ithaca, the modern story physically gets closer to the locations in the ancient
Mm.
story.
Mm.
In Telegonus, there's more themes across the two separate storylines. You know, so what's happening in that ancient story is getting played out and driving some of the what's happening in the present.
Mm.
Um, I mean, just commenting about generally the challenging part of writing is not necessarily getting the stories down, but the edit. I always think of the first edit as the pig edit
Yeah.
because it's where you really have to drill down into the story
Yes.
and nail it. And it can just be a hard slog, a
Yeah.
real hard
Yeah.
graft,
Yeah.
getting that done, you know, where you're doing it step by step.
Yeah.
You're moving it forward, but it feels just such a hard trudge up that mountain.
Yeah.
But
Did
at the
you?
same
Oh,
time,
sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, at the same time, I think that's where the magic happens, you know, is where it makes the story more engaging. You know, so for example, in Telegonos, it was working out what could be so significant and big that it would cause um, a disruption in the relationship in the modern story,
Mm-hmm.
um, but
Don't give
also
us any
you
spoiler.
still
Yeah.
no,
Don't
no,
spoil
no, but you
anything. Yeah.
still feel sympathetic for the character Thea. So what is it that does that? And that probably delayed publishing the novel, getting that nailed,
Yeah.
probably delayed the novel by about 12 months from
Yeah.
coming out, from
Yeah.
publishing.
That
Um,
sounds like a yeah, very kind of like plausible, you know, timeline. To be honest, yep, yeah, 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 100%. No, yeah,
yeah. And I think
that's
the other thing is, as a writer, it's also being flexible to when something isn't working, you know, because can take a long, long time to craft a particular scene or particular narrative within the story.
yes,
And then one of your readers will say, no, I don't like that. That doesn't work. And having to jettison that. And it's kind of, you can feel it's quite hard to let that go. So, for example, I've got a Greek friend who checks the Greek side of things in the
right,
stories and came back to me and said something like, you know, no Greek village woman would ever say such a thing. So I had to go back and adapt the story to make it more true, authentic to Greek life. You
right,
know, so again, it's a rewrite. And uh, you know, but I think actually that's retrospectively, it makes a better story and it makes a better
Yeah.
reading experience.
Yes.
And I think that, the 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 telegonos is more satisfactory, the ending, and much sharper, the
Hmm.
writing,
All
because
right.
of that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that kind of like, kind of also links to the first question, right? Like how has it like changed? How do you feel has changed you and your writing? And you see like that kind of like, maturity staging, that maturing of like, this what, yeah, you said like 5 years that have passed basically since, 2020, since
Yes.
yeah, 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 yeah. Right. So, yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, you know, that humbles you, but I mean, it sounds like it's also like it inspires you further, right? So, I mean, I guess we're waiting for the third book at some point. Yes.
Yes.
Right. I'm
Yes.
not gonna ask for a date. I don't want to like pressure you or anything. Like, obviously,
Oh,
you just published the Legos. I don't, don't worry. I don't want you to tell me. It's absolutely fine. The
yeah.
least you want is, people pressuring you with questions like that. But
Yeah.
I
There
would
is a
say, yeah,
third book that it will be is in the pipeline, but is at the moment that I've got a working trip a bit later on this year,
yeah,
which is to the island of Samos. So it's without giving too much away, but again, there's ideas coming, and
yes.
so
And you're
yes,
working on them, putting them together exactly in the way that you literally just described.
yeah, yeah,
Kind of, going back on the drawing board basically, again and again until it actually makes sense. Make it make sense, but it's in the creative process. I love it.
yeah.
Well, all the best with that. And I think, before we go, like my last question would be, what would you tell, our viewers, the readers, or people that are interested in reading your book? What would you advise them before they actually read the book? I don't know. Would you leave them with a bit of a, I don't know, tip or like something that might make more sense when like reading the books or something?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I would say with the books is that kind of read the books on, don't take things necessarily at the surface level, but kind of read
Love that.
there's different kind of depths to the story,
Excellent.
and sort of be open to that. So not
Yeah.
necessarily taking things absolutely on
Yeah.
face
Face
value.
value. Yeah, like it's a
Yeah,
very
with
like very kind of like superficial readings basically. I love that.
yeah,
So yeah, just basically go with an open mind for like more like in-depth reading, like reading maybe between the lines. Or like how some people do have this habit, yeah, of just revisiting a book basically. It's like rereading it. So would you say that
yeah.
these are your books basically, yeah, where someone might read them at first,
Probably if
but
you
then
read it
maybe
maybe the
give them
second
another,
time,
yeah.
you maybe pick things up, more things up. Yeah,
Right. Okay. No, that's there. So yeah,
yeah,
like a good rewatch and a good reread, basically. Amazing.
yeah. And also, unfortunately, I can't provide a pool or sun lounger with every purchase, but
But
it's obviously
recommended.
a good summer read or
Yes.
holiday read,
Yes.
and
It's a
probably is
serving suggestion.
immersive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love that. I love that. So yeah, definitely, doesn't come with a sun lounger. We have to say it now. Yeah. Because I have to say as well that you are able to get hold of Jackie's book through the Diavazo Greek books with a dedication as well. With
yeah,
signed copies, because she's a local author, she's an independent author, and that's what we do in the Diavazo Greek books. We do support independence and independent authors like that in their journeys. So yeah, but like the sun loungers and the parasols and like a nice pool are definitely recommended, suggested by the author. Okay, so in order to enjoy this book at its maximum. So it's been absolutely lovely, Jackie. Sorry,
yeah,
Anna. I've been like, it's been a pleasure. It's been such a good kind of opportunity as well to finally get together, and I'm so glad we managed it as well. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
and
for your patience as
technology,
well.
the technology gods favoured us this evening. So,
Absolutely. It was exactly. It was meant to be today. Exactly. It was meant to be last week. It was today. I love it. So I
yeah,
all the best with your journey. All the best with your next book as well. It's been a pleasure having you,
yeah,
and we'll definitely be on the lookout for the next book. But
yeah,
in the meantime, there's two more books for people to enjoy, like two like lovely books to actually get hold of. So Finding Ithaca and Telegonos of the Ionian Trilogy by Anna Harvey, available in all the good bookstores, including Diavazo Greek books. And with that, we'll say our goodbyes. And
yes.
again, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
and thank you for hosting,
A pleasure.
Pavlina. Yeah,
An
okay.
absolute pleasure. Have a good one.
Yeah,
Take care.
goodbye. Yasu, yeah.
Bye.